directly to jail again. Either you're cheating or this game is rigged. Fine. Dear Tim and Moby, who was Fannie Lou Hamer from Megan? Well, on August 24th, 1964, a lot of Americans were asking that same question. That night, they turned on the TV to see Hamer on every news program. She looks like a nice middle-aged young lady, or somebody's mom or your neighbor, but her home state in Mississippi, she was well known as a fierce voting rights activist. For the past 2 years, she's been fighting to get African Americans access to polls. The Constitution said that the right to could be voted be denied due to race, but southern states had found all sorts of ways to get around the law or to strip the right to vote. Black Southerners had no voice in the racist system. And try to fight it, you face jail time and imitation and violence. Hamer had experienced it all, and after that night, she shared her story. And it just was a few minutes long, but full of hardship and brutality. Viewers who never heard it before wept. And overnight, she went on to become a local activist to a national civil rights leader. Fannie Lou Hamer was born in Mississippi in 1917, the youngest of 20 children. Her grandma had been enslaved, and her mom and dad, like many descendants of enslaved people, were sharecroppers. A plantation owner rented them farmland in exchange for the share of their crops. But he also charged high rates for tools and for any other expenses. Like the most sharecroppers, like they were constantly in debt. Fannie Lou had to leave school after 6th grade but to be helping her family in the fields. Well, as an adult, she earned a position of responsibility on a plantation. She recorded each farmer's harvest and tried to get them to their fair share. Then in August 1962, the members of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or SNCC, visited her church. And all the country, the civil rights movement was heating up, and the SNCC was one of the major players. And the students activists trained the local community leaders to join the fight. And in Mississippi, they focused on registering black voters. They told the congregation they could sweep out racist officials. Hamer was stunned. She didn't even know that she had a right to vote. When the NSNCC asked for volunteers to register the vote, she raised her hand pretty high. Well, no, and it wasn't even that simple. An angry crowd gathered at the courthouse to be meeting the 18 volunteers. They tried to scare Hamer and the others from trying to register, but the volunteers struck together and made themselves their way in. Inside the courthouse, the clerk was no more welcoming. He demanded the group to pass a test before registering. They were asked to explain a legal concept about the exacto facts. Yeah, that was the whole point of a literacy test, to be nearly impossible to pass, so clerks could refuse anybody their right to vote. They also demand a poll tax and a fee to men to discourage would-be voters. No surprise, but the all SNCC volunteers failed the literacy test. On their home, their bus was stopped by the police. They said that the yellow color light was illegal. Hamer sang the song to keep the group's spirits up until they were let go, and that night she was fired from her job and evicted from her home. The plantation owner had heard about her attempt to register, and a few nights later somebody shut the house where she was staying at. And afraid for her children, Hamer consideration leaving town for good, but she couldn't even convince herself to leave her place that her parents had built. She rented a house from a neighbor and took a job with SNCC. Well, Hamer's home had become a gathering place for voters and its civil rights leaders. And among them, she stood out, and she wasn't a male, young, and educated, or a middle class, because she knew what poor families endured because she lived it. In the first-hand experience that made her a powerful speaker, she would often break it into sudden to motivated crowds. Before long, she was well known as her singing voice as her activism. But her Influence growing made her a target for racist attacks. She got threatening letters and phone calls, and her husband lost at the job after job. Somebody threw a bomb in her house, and luckily it failed to explode. Then in June of 1963, Hamer and the six fellow activists were arrested. They tried to eat at a whites only diner, and local police had held them for 3 days for beating them and torturing them. Hamer's kidneys were permanently damaged, and she lost sight in one eye. Well, Hamer and other activists realized that the legal authorities were not going to change unless they were being forced to. So in 1964, they started a massive voter registration called the Freedom Summer, and it brought most of college students down to Mississippi. They went to door registering the black voters, and it was dangerous work. 3 volunteers were murdered in the first week. The nation could no longer ignore what was happening in Mississippi. For the rest of the summer, stories of beatings and shootings have made headlines around the country. Then at the end of August, Hamer and other activists went to Atlantic City, New Jersey. That was the start of the Democratic National Convention, where the big party event chooses its nominee for each president. Each state sends a group of people to cast the official vote, and in no surprise, Mississippi's representatives were all whites. Hamer's group was there to challenge their authority. Since the state executed black voters, they said that the delegation was illegal. They were Mississippi's true representatives, and they had registrations to prove it. Well, the protests are coming up, bro, and Hamer was given a lot to speak. Before the national audience, she described what she had endured, simply trying to vote, and being threatened and be shot by fellow citizens, beaten by the police. She challenged the nation to consider its own values. Hamer is this America, and the land of the free, of the home, and of the brave. And if we had to sleep where the telephones off the hooks, and because our lives be threatened daily, and because we want to live as decent human beings in America. Her testimony replayed on the news for days. Well, Hamer and her group weren't seated at the convention, but a year later, President Lyndon B. Johnson wrote the Civil Voting Act of 1965, and it all out of barriers for voting, literacy tests, and poll taxes. And at the convention of 1968, Hamer was chosen to be official delegate. She received a standing ovation. Hamer's activists continued her passive right time movement, and she fought for women's rights and protested in the Vietnam War and ran for office several times. She founded Freedom Farm and cooperated to help black farmers to climb out of her property. And when she passed away in 1977, she was buried there. Yeah, but I guess it's your turn to roll. Are you insane?